Hello, my friends. This is Uncle Mike, and today is 7/22/21, and we got ourselves a deep one. It's been a while since I've done something quite this deep, or at least in my opinion. And so this should be a good one. This should be definitely a good one, and let's just jump right in. So I'm calling this the 2-mile strange attractor field in Wilmington, Delaware. And this is very topical, particularly in light of everything that is happening in the world right now, and maybe even more so, how it came to be. Mostly how did we find ourselves in the position which the world is in right now? And I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Now, my personal opinion is maybe there's a conspiratorial element, but of greater interest to me, at least, is the fact that this is beyond planning. This is something else. This is an unfolding of life. And what we're seeing in the most literal sense, and what I'm going to demonstrate and show you, is where in physical reality and material reality we can see the touch points of many of the players in the current situation. And I'm being a little bit vague with my language, but I'm doing that just to, to trip up algorithms. So, from my understanding, the way I want to go and explain what we're going to be looking at is that of a strange attractor field. So attractor fields or attractors in mathematics is it's a concept. It's talking about how a state, a specific endpoint in which systems evolve towards. And the strange attractor field has a fractal structure. And it is my sense, it is my opinion, it is my conclusion that this is a mathematical description of the byproduct of what we might think of as ritual and/or high magic. And so what I'm pointing at and where I'm going to go with all of this is going to be very much grounded in material reality. I'm going to focus on a very, very specific place in reality, which you can go and visit. But I'm not suggesting that everything which I'm saying was part of a plan as much as what we're seeing is the predictable outcome of rituals and, maybe even a specific plan which was hatched long ago. So this presentation really has its roots from a video I put out a couple weeks ago called Synchronistic Storytelling, the Bruce Willis Brad Pitt Lattice. And I would encourage, if you haven't seen this video, to go back and watch this video, or if you have seen it, take in consideration or put into context everything from that video and everything which we're going to cover right now. It's all connected. So within that video, I talked about five movies: Fight Club, 12 Monkeys, The Sixth Sense, Looper, and Once Upon a Time in America. And specifically, there were 3 films, The Sixth Sense, 12 Monkeys, and Fight Club, which happen within this area of the East Coast in North America, in the United States, between Philadelphia and Baltimore. And not exactly in the middle, but we find Wilmington, Delaware. And Wilmington, Delaware is really where we're focusing on, and again, the points of which were made as it relates to Fight Club, I think are can be expanded upon what we're going to go into later today. For those of you who are not that familiar with this part of the world which I'm talking about, this is Delaware right here in red, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, there's New York City, but this is where we're going to be focused upon. And also to give a context also of this area, I would also make reference to another video I put out a couple weeks ago with Roz Ben, and this was episode 9 of From the 40th Parallel. And particularly in this video, pay attention to the beginning of Roz's presentation as he was talking about the land prior to the arrival of the colonization scheme, because that land is, you know, what we're going to be talking about right now, which is, you know, this area right here. So take both of these videos, you know, maybe you want to go back and re-watch them after you hear what I have to show right now. So let's just jump right in. The 2-mile strange attractor, Joe Biden, the current worldwide health operation, world-class research and development with Nazi roots, and an Illuminati bloodline. We're going to find all of these topics are grounded in this 2-mile stretch. If you're familiar with my work, I've talked about this area before. In fact, I've always been kind of drawn to this area, and as time is unfolding, it's becoming more and more clear. And, you know, it's brought me to where I am right now, about to present to you this information. So let's go look at the area in question. Here is our 2 miles. We have this endpoint right here, which is St. Joseph on the Brandywine. It's a Roman Catholic church. We have over here AstraZeneca's North American headquarters. And then in between is this area, which is the Numara Estate, the AI DuPont Hospital for Children, and the DuPont Experimental Station. So let's keep on going in here. The church, St. Joseph's on the Brandywine, has received international focus, particularly during the day of the inauguration of Joe Biden, as it was reported as like kind of this big deal, how Joe Biden, he went to this church. You know, his prayer life is always part of his narrative, and he went, this is his church, his home church, St. Joseph on the Brandywine, and this is also where his family is buried. So we've got this. We're going to come back to the inauguration in a little bit, but this is one of our key points right here. And we could see St. Joseph on the Brandywine. It is noted for its historic parish church complex and National Historic District, Old Church Road. And it is the home parish of the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden. We could see right here, I'm going to talk about the experimental station in a moment, but it's less than a mile away. It's less than a mile away from there. So the next point on the map is AstraZeneca's North American Commercial Business Headquarters. We see that right here in Wilmington, Delaware. We'll get into that a little bit more deeply in a moment. We also have found in there the DuPont Experimental Station, which is the largest research and development facility of the DuPont Corporation. Here we can see this picture, like this entire corporate complex is referred to as the experimental station. As you can see, it's quite large, and if you were to drive up in their main entrance, this is their gated entrance. I don't know if they're armed guards, but it's certainly, you know, there's a there's a station right here, which is an indication of the security and the significance of what's happening. You know, you can just take that with like regular mundane sort of like, you know, this is top secret sort of research and development, or you could go and say what's going on in the basement floors, which you don't know. Nonetheless, like, you know, this is what we have here, the experimental station. We also have the AI DuPont Hospital for Children. It's not lost upon me the double entendre with AI, which is the initials of the DuPont family member whose foundation is behind the establishment of the hospital, with, you know, what AI means nowadays. But anyway, AI DuPont Hospital for Children is a nationally recognized hospital, named one of the nation's best children's hospitals year after year. Orthopedic care, you know, it's just, you know, it's a top mainstream hospital. You know, read into that which you may. Here's some pictures of it. This is there was maybe, I don't know, like 10 years ago, they built this part of it. You could see right here, this is part, I think, of the estate, of which I'll get into in a moment. You could see how close they are. This right here, I can't tell if that's a parking garage or maybe it is part of the old facility. So there's a newer facility, the expanded part of the hospital, and this is probably the older part. I mean, we could go so deep into this. Like, I mean, there's so much in this area, which I have covered a little bit in the past, but I'm going to brush over it for this presentation because we're going into somewhere else. But anyway, I just want to go and point all of the players that are in this area. And then we have the Numar Mansion and Gardens. And so this is a 300-acre country estate with French formal gardens, and it doesn't say here when it was built. It was built in 1910. And that is actually this is the original, this estate. This is the original landowner of all of this area right here. This area was all part of the estate, and then it was shaved off for the hospital, and then the experimental station. This predates it, and then this came much later, but nonetheless, we're all in the same space. So where are we here? Here's some pictures of it. You know, these are the gardens. This is the back of the house. The Numar Foundation is the sole benefactor of the AI DuPont Trust. It's valued at $3.4 billion in 2007. It's also it's a blending of the AI DuPont Trust and the Edward Ball Trust. I'm going to go into, or the next presentation I'm doing with Roz Ben is we're going into the ball worship. So I just want to point that out right there. But all of this area, all of these different, seemingly disconnected organizations, entities are all found in the same 2-mile stretch. And we're not even getting into like what was on this land beforehand, but, you know, well, you'll see where we're going to go with this presentation. So let's begin with the companies, the corporate aspect of this. Trust the Science, IG Farben. There are 3 companies I want to talk about. I want to talk about IG Farben, DuPont, and ICI UK. So AstraZeneca is ICI is Pilgrim Society. So if you're familiar with AstraZeneca, if you've already done, a lot of people have gone into the research of who and what AstraZeneca is. You know, I'm going to touch upon some of that, but, you know, it goes much, much deeper than where I'm going to go. But all of this can be verified. So where are we right here? AstraZeneca is a British-Swedish multinational pharmaceutical biotechnology company, but here's where their North American headquarters is, right here in Wilmington. And AstraZeneca, It was formed in 1999 as a merger between two companies called Zeneca and Astra. And Zeneca, which was formed in 1993, was from a demerger of an arm of ICI, Imperial Chemical Industries. So we can see that you have ICI, and then ICI spun off Zeneca, and then Zeneca and Astra came together, and they formed AstraZeneca. That's kind of the history of the founding of AstraZeneca. I'm going to focus on Zeneca right now, but Astra is very interesting. They're probably best known as being a pioneer in the development of SRRI technology, the mood enhancing sort of drugs which have been unleashed on humanity for probably about 30 years now, I think is how long that, like Prozac and Zoloft and all of those different brand name SSRIs. Is it SRRI or SSRI? I don't know. But you know what I'm talking about. So this is like the roots of this AstraZeneca company, which is now headquartered in their North American headquarters, at least, are in Wilmington. So let's look a little bit more into ICI. So ICI is a British company. It was founded in 1926, and it big multinational conglomerate, part of the FT30 and the FTSE 100 indexes. So that's like kind of like the Dow Jones indexes, the biggest companies. The point I'm trying to make is it's a very big company. It says right here that ICI, they were competing with DuPont and IG Farben, but I'm going to show you in a moment that, that's just outer surface. Like they're the same company. They've been in bed together for a very, very long time. And we can see the key people here. We see Alfred Mond. He was the first CEO. So Alfred Mond, this guy is, I go and do research on this guy. There's lots of stuff out there, but this guy is involved in a lot of the planning of the world which we are experiencing now. This guy was one of the architects back in the early 1900s and so forth. And so here we have right here, what do I got? Red alert, British ICI created AstraZeneca by spinning off half of its monopolistic global operations to form an instant mega corporation staffed by ICI and Pilgrim Society handlers like Sir Dennis Hartley Henderson, who's involved with, I don't even know how to pronounce this, I don't know, Serco. Like, if you're familiar with these companies, if you're not familiar with these companies, you should definitely be familiar with their companies. But if you are familiar, these are the players that are involved with behind AstraZeneca. ICI with DuPont following along is ICI, the British Explosive Trust. The only fair thing was to sell munitions to both sides in any hostility. That is part of the DuPont Corporation's history, is the fact that these guys were, they're death merchants. They sold tools of death to both sides of any hostility. In fact, they probably started or participated in the hostilities, then got rich off of other people's misery. This is all kind of if you're watching this is advanced level conspiracy and advanced level synchromysticism. So I'm making some assumptions that if you're watching this, that you have an understanding of where I'm coming from with these companies, and the Pilgrim Society in particular. If you're not familiar with the Pilgrim Society, you should probably become familiar with the Pilgrim Society. There's a lot of really good information out there on them, and it also explains, the behind the scenes of how seemingly disconnected nations and organizations can be in total lockstep. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing total lockstep of governments and corporations and media with the exact same message, which is being fostered upon the peoples of Earth. here we see more about Mund with his role within with the Pilgrim Society. And I found this right here. I'm going to read from it. This is kind of a summary. There aren't really any footnotes tied to it, but check it out. Like it backs up. So AstraZeneca is a dangerous globalist. Oh, this is the sort of stuff that gets you banned. AstraZeneca is a dangerous globalist company established by Pilgrim Society co-founder Sir Alfred Nobel as ICI to develop a monopoly for the British Empire in the chemical business. They expanded into pharmaceuticals just like Wellcome Fund then and now. ICI was formed by Alfred Nobel, founder of the Pilgrim Society, organizer of the First Imperial Press Conference, 1909, co-founder of MI6, MI5, the British Zionist Foundation. This is where all of the actual nuts and bolts establishment for the structure for these organizations kind of took place. This is the Mon guy. This is the guy who founded ICI. And, man, I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but you can go through and read this, pause it right now, and you can see that these are all players. CIA, Carlyle Group, all of the private equity funds, they all are connected. It's all connected. They're all connected. And the North American headquarters for the one, where do we have right here? The one tentacle of this Pilgrim Society, Kraken is AstraZeneca, and we know the role which AstraZeneca is playing right now on the world stage. So what we need to, or what I want to go and point out right now, is that ICI, DuPont, and I mean the corporation DuPont, and IG Farben were and are business partners. And the nature of their business is and has always been anti-human, anti-earth, and pro-death. So let's go look at this. This is a United States versus the Imperial Chemical Industries. This is from the District Court of the Southern District of New York, and this is 1951. And then this is the conclusion. Beginning sometime prior to 1920, DuPont. Remember, so we've got the AstraZeneca, aka ICI, North American headquarters is right, within a handful of miles from the DuPont Research and Development epicenter. So we can see they've been in business for a long time. DuPont and ICI, and IG Farben. And beginning in the year 1933, Remington and Charles Davis were engaged in a combination of conspiracy in restraint of trade and commerce in chemical products, sporting arms, and ammunition. So let's not get too bogged down in like the specifics of this. They're talking about controlling markets and price fixing and all of this sort of stuff. And that in itself, is significant, but what I really want to focus upon right now is these guys were in agreement. These guys were in agreement behind the scenes, as corporations, whomever within those organizations are making those agreements. You can assume that one or two things, that this is the only area in which they're in agreement, or they are in agreement in many, many other areas. And I think as we're beginning to see that, that they're in agreement in a lot of different areas. So, I'll go back to this Wikipedia thing because we know how Wikipedia is, but it says right here, that this is ICI's Wikipedia entry. They were competing with DuPont and IG Farben. Were they? Were they really? Because they seem to be working hand in hand with them. This here is a little bit more information, or more recent information on ICI, and it says in 1992 the company ICI sold its nylon business to DuPont. So just the point I'm trying to make right here, it's like, yeah, they're always in business with one another, spinning off organizations or different companies within the larger conglomerate, selling it to others. Like, everyone's like connected in this business. The year after ICI sold its nylon business to DuPont is when they spun off their pharmaceutical and biosciences unit, and then formed this independent Zeneca. So we can see this timeline. Right here we could see the DuPonts were apparently so impressed with the German expansion and recovery, rearmaments, that they decided to invest in promising German companies. And it's just, this with their holdings in IG Farben and its subsidiaries. So this is talking like back in pre-World War II, but we can see that the DuPont organization was business partners with IG Farben. IG Farben, ICI, and DuPont, they from the very beginning, they were in business with one another, even though they appear to be competitors. You know, Coke and Pepsi, they appear to be competitors, but they're in the same business of putting soda products in, you know, as many bodies as they possibly can. See right here, more, this is from 1926. We can see that there is a license agreement between DuPont and it's DAG. You'll see where they come from in a moment, but DAG is part of IG Farben. We talked a little bit about that. This here is from a Senate hearing, 1934. In order to have a correct understanding, so these are the what do you call it, when the person who keeps track of everything which is said within a Senate hearing, that's what this is. The transcript, this is the transcript. In order to have a correct understanding of that agreement, it is necessary to review previous agreements. There are important differences, yet there is a considerable similarity. So again, we want to focus on where it's similar and not where they're different. The agreement of 1907, which is as far back as necessary to go, was between the British company, and so one of these British companies is what came to make ICI. ICI was actually founded, where do we see that? Right here. ICI was founded in 1926 of the merger of Brunner Mond, this is where we get the Mond guy, Nobel Explosives, United Alkali Company, and British Dye Stuffs Corporation. So this is talking about one of those earlier British companies, but we could see as far back as we go, the British company and a German company, I'm not going to try to say that, and DuPont, that they had agreement, which included military explosives. They've always been in the business with explosives and death and all this sort of, you know, anti-human, anti-earth sort of stuff. This is the questioning. There's one more question of fact that I should like to refer to. This concerns the Kohn-Rottweiler crowd that seems, according to the evidence, to have been taken out of the picture later on and became part of DAG. And so this is the response from Lamont DuPont. I don't think that's correct. And then Mr. Rauschenbusch, is that not correct? And then DuPont says, there were two commercial powder companies in Germany, DAG and Kohn-Rottweiler. Are they hooked up in any way? Yes, they're both part of IG Farben. So we can see, like, it's a very, very, like, interconnected sort of group. They're both competing, but then at the same time, they are in cahoots with one another. So I'm making some assumptions that you guys know who IG Farben is. So IG Farben was a German chemical and pharmaceutical conglomerate. It was formed in 1925, the same year in which ICI was formed. But IG Farben is best known for its relationship with the Third Reich. Probably it is the best modern example of a complete overlap of a corporate entity with a government agency, the Third Reich, and they were very much involved with the concentration camps. We'll get a little bit more into that in a moment. But before we get into that, I just want to go and say, like, there's an even deeper interconnection which all of these companies have. And it's like ICI, DuPont, and IG Farben all have a common business ancestor, and that is Alfred Nobel, the Merchant of Death. We all know him from, like, the Nobel Peace Prize. There's the irony. That's kind of like the mocking of everything, right? So Alfred Nobel, a Swedish chemist, engineer, inventor, businessman, and philanthropist. He held 355 different patents, dynamite being his most famous. So this is a history of component companies and mergers. So it's 1865. Remember, we were talking earlier about the early 1900s. Let's go back to 1865. Alfred Nobel founded, Alfred Nobel and Company was founded near Hamburg, Germany. We could see that in 1866, he founded the United States Blasting Oil Company. 67, receives a patent for dynamite. In 1871, the British Dynamite Company, founded in Ardere, Scotland. These are all the same companies, or they're all founded from. They all have this Nobel beginning point. We could see a little bit later that Alfred Nobel and Company changes its name to DAG. Remember, we saw all of that stuff with IG Farben and DAG. This is the DAG. It used to be known as Alfred Nobel Company. We could see right here that British Dynamite Company was founded in Ardere, Scotland, 1871. This is slightly off, according to Wikipedia, their dates are, but I think we can make the pretty clear assumption that we're dealing with the same organization. Nobel Enterprises was based in Ardere in Scotland, so this is the same one. And they say Nobel Industries, Nobel Prizes, it was founded in 1870. Here it says 1871. It's the same company. So why is Nobel Industries Limited interesting? Because it is Nobel Industries, which merges with the Mond and Company and the Alkali and the British dye stuffs, which becomes ICI. So what we have right here, this company, this becomes ICI, and this company right here, it's all the same friggin' people. This becomes IG Farben. They're the same friggin' company. They're the same company. Or at least they begin with the same place. So a little bit more about Alfred Nobel. Though he was widely credited with being a pacifist, it's not known whether Nobel approved of dynamite's military use or not. Whether or not he approved of it or not, he certainly benefited from it financially. And so as the story goes, this is the story which is presented to, to the masses, is that Alfred Nobel's brother died, and there was a mix-up in the obituary, and they thought it was Alfred Nobel who died, the inventor of TNT. So he read an obituary about himself, but it was applied to his brother, and this French newspaper referred to him as the Merchant of Death is dead. So they're thinking they're talking about this Alfred Nobel, but he didn't really die. And he sees this story, and he was so upset the fact that his how he would be remembered was going to be as a merchant of death. So he decided to, right before he dies, he creates a trust which will become the Nobel, which will be the foundation for the Nobel Prize, and in order to change the way he is remembered in history. And so, probably most people are very familiar with the Nobel Prize, and very, very few people are probably aware that, the guy who's behind it is actually the guy who's behind dynamite and a whole lot of other technologies which have been used to kill millions of people. Nobel, the obituary went on to describe Nobel as a man who became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before. Keep in mind that, if you follow what goes on in the Nobel committees, they're always controversial. They're always said to have a political agenda one way or the other. But nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make is that there is this relationship between DuPont, ICI, and IG Farben from the very beginning. And it has always been about death by explosives, pharmaceutical, and experimentation. So, let me go and specifically talk about the experimentation aspect right now. So we're hearing a lot, you hear a lot, right, about the Nuremberg trials, particularly what's going on in the world right now. And so the Nuremberg trials deal specifically with IG Farben, because what IG Farben was doing was they were testing on people against their will. They were doing research and development on people. This right here, this is law reports of the trials of war criminals held by the United Nations. IG Farben. This is one of the many guys who was brought up on charges in this kind of mockery of a trial. This guy was the chairman of DAG, formerly the Nobel Corporation. He was chairman and member of control groups and several other subsidiary and affiliated Farben concerns. So we see all of the same players. Auschwitz, we know everything which they tell us about World War II is questionable. That doesn't mean it's all false, but it just means that the narrative has been manipulated. But so we're looking at Auschwitz right now, which is a well-known concentration camp, and it was the setting for IG Auschwitz, which was a 100% subsidiary of IG Farben. The IG Auschwitz factory was not the only place where human testing was conducted on victims. IG Farben had its own concentration camp. They're talking about the IG Auschwitz factory, which was controlled by the Third Reich. So they were adjacent. They were part of the same kind of like complex, but one part of it was the subsidiary, 100% subsidiary of IG Farben, and we see that there. IG Farben had its own concentration camp, and there tested vaccines and chemicals were applied to both sick and healthy individuals in the form of injections, pills, enemas, powders. Sounds familiar. This is a story, and this isn't like just limited to, back in the 40s and the 50s. Here we see, this is a story from 20 years ago, 1999. And we can see that there was an Auschwitz guinea pig who sued Bayer. Bayer was another one of the, once after World War II, they broke off the different parts of IG Farben into different corporations, and one of them being Bayer Pharmaceuticals. So this woman, what's her name? Eva Kor, she sued them, but the point I'm trying to make is why she's suing is like her and her sister, who are twins, they were age 9 when they were one of the 1,500 sets of twins that underwent experiments by Joseph Mengele. Mengele is involved with IG Farben's industrial empire, and this was all done in the form of research and development. Is this starting to sound familiar? What do we have right here? This is the DuPont experimental station. Right here is the AI DuPont Hospital for Children. This is a nationally recognized center of excellence for children with rare diseases. Where else are you going to want to go and do your experiments? So I'm not saying that they definitely were, but I'm saying at the very least we're seeing the exact same sort of model with the same sort of corporations who've always been in bed together. And I'm suggesting that they have a very, very common modus operandi. Here we have AstraZeneca. Here's the hospital. We've got Zeneca right here. This is the Children's Hospital, and you can't see it in this image, but right on the other side is where we see the experimental station. This sounds very, very similar. A whitewashed example of maybe like, some of the concentration camps in which you saw in Germany. And I haven't really talked much about the DuPont Corporation, but, the DuPont Corporation has a very, has an effective public relations arm. And the reason why I say that is because DuPont isn't necessarily thought of as one of these horrible corporations in the same way which other companies which do the exact same thing which they do currently. So here's like an article where it says, I find it very interesting that Monsanto, because everyone knows Monsanto's horrible, is one of the most hated companies on the planet, with the internet and social media full of stories and passed around memes that declare it as being one of the worst companies in the world, and yet DuPont is just as big in genetically modified seeds and agricultural chemicals, and they basically, they get a pass. So the author of this article asks, so it merits the question, why is Monsanto evil but DuPont is not? That's good public relations. That's good public relations there. So let's go and move on. And we're going to go, I'm talking a little bit about DuPont, and probably more so I'm implying like what DuPont is, who they're linked with ICI/AstraZeneca and IG Farben, and we can make assumptions that and we know, the slide which you just went to right before, we can see a little bit about DuPont's questionable past, but they don't necessarily have as bad of a reputation. But I want to go right now to the DuPont family, because you can't separate DuPont the company from DuPont the family. So here are a couple statements which I want to pull out right here. This quote, in Delaware, the family name is interchangeable with DuPont, the world's chemical company, where it's basically saying, the name DuPont is interchangeably, the family with the corporation. I'm not going to really go too deep into the history of the DuPont family and the DuPont company, but it's not too hard to go and find. That's all out there. Also, like this line right here, we end with the direct statement that the DuPonts today rule Delaware with an iron hand. The state of Delaware and DuPont are interchangeable. The corporation, DuPont, the family, DuPont, it's all the same. So let's look at the DuPont family for a little bit right here. This is Wikipedia. The DuPont family is a prominent American family, descendants of Pierre Samuel DuPont de Nemours. It has been one of the richest families in the United States since the mid-19th century, where it founded its fortune on the gunpowder business. In the late 19th and 20th centuries, it expanded its wealth through the chemical industry and the automotive industry, with substantial interests in the DuPont Company, General Motors. In 2016, the family fortune was estimated at $14 billion. We could see here that the family is very involved with, with government and the unfolding of the story of the United States. It even predates, like a lot of the DuPont Corporation sort of history starts with the early 1800s, but we can see in this article here that the patriarch, Pierre DuPont, he had relationships with Jefferson, Madison, like with the founding fathers. This family line is very much tied into the establishment of the United States. And, this is just part of history and like mainstream Wikipedia history. So if we're going to go and look like a little bit deeper than that, we could go to some of, you're probably familiar with Fritz Springmeier's work and his magnum opus, The Bloodlines of the Illuminati, the 13 families. And, the DuPonts being one of them, a dynasty of satanic royalty, I chose to include this. You can read much of this book online. There are lots of places where it can be found. I just find it rather funny that, you can find it on the CIA website. But nonetheless, let me read a little bit about the DuPonts from this perspective, the DuPont from the Illuminati satanic perspective. And whether one is aware of the secret satanic power of the DuPonts or not, it is inescapable to conclude that the family is exceedingly powerful in the United States beyond comprehension. Every facet of our lives is influenced by products whose production is still ultimately under the control of the DuPont family of control. For those people who subscribe to the theory that the world is divided between the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, look at the DuPonts, who are truly independent of the other top families, dispels that theory. To quote Carl Schriffenzinger in his book Families, the DuPonts of Delaware constitute a definite dynasty, perhaps the most complete dynasty ever established in this republic, and one which seems destined to continue its kingship for generations to come. Today, there are 700 members of the family. Every time a package of cigarettes is opened, a simple tearing of the tab is a gesture of tribute. A gesture of tribute. Remember that. Hopefully I'll remember to come back to that myself, but a gesture of tribute to the DuPonts. And every time a great gun booms, with whatever cost of life or property, it echoes merrily in the feudal stronghold in this mighty clan. We must end with the direct statement that the DuPonts today rule Delaware with an iron hand, that their interests affect the daily lives of each one of us in some way, and that the family moves on. It is today the great dynasty. Closed, unassailed, it keeps to itself, hides its scandals, boasts not of its good works, but continues within American democracy to exert its own indomitable way. All right, let's go and look at some other stuff which is said. This here is from Robin D. Routier, Worldwide Evil and Misery, the Legacy of the 13 Satanic Bloodlines. The ruling families are also behind the worldwide drug trade, with the help of the CIA and the British Secret Service. So MI6, remember, this is MI6 is a byproduct of Alfred Mond. Alfred Mond is the founder of ICI, or he was the first CEO, and he was one of the primary players that developed the Pilgrim Society, and the Pilgrim Society is also behind the development of the CIA. But okay. They are at the head of the worldwide drug mafia and control the entire trade and sale of drugs. During a television interview, Louis DuPont let it slip that the worldwide drug trade was in the hands of powerful families. This shouldn't come to surprise to everyone. Like, this is like, if you go and do your research, like, this has been shown and demonstrated time and time and time again. Louis DuPont was the driving spirit behind the book Dope. This book reveals the leading figures in the worldwide drug trade. The following families and persons are associated with the drug trade: the Astors, the DuPonts, the Kennedys, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Russells, the Chinese family Lee. Because of his collaboration, maybe in this book, Louis DuPont ran into substantial trouble with his family. Owing to a government informant, he narrowly escaped kidnapping, torture, and brainwashing on his father's yacht. All right, so there's a lot more about the DuPonts in this book right here, The DuPont Dynasty Behind the Nylon Curtain. I want to point this out because they're talking about like the DuPonts and the CIA and drug trade. Everyone should know about that right now. In this book, it shows this, this is just the slide, but it goes in much greater detail where it connects Richard DuPont with the CIA's illegal war on drugs. We can see that right here, and this connects to Bill Clinton. If you know that history, we could see it's all the same people. It's all the same families. None of this is surprising, and it all is grounded back in this 2-mile stretch in Delaware. I'm going to pull this out because I thought this was rather interesting. So this is an article from Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair is, kind of like highbrow mainstream magazines. And so this is an article from 2008, and it's the Blue Blood War, and it's talking about this guy, Louis DuPont, the Louis DuPont, which was discussed right up here. And it's saying, a family cringes as father and son wage a bitter and public battle of wills. Louis E. Newbold Smith, who married to DuPont. The son is Louis DuPont Smith, who took his own vows with the radical Lyndon LaRouche. Newbold had Louis declared incompetent to manage his $10 million estate. And so here's just one paragraph I want to pull from this article. Remember, this is 2008. This is 2008. This is before, what is considered common, almost like common understanding of Illuminati and Rockefeller and Jeffrey Epstein. Think about how common, whether or not that's completely subscribed by everyone who's got a mainstream perspective. They've probably have heard of the Illuminati nowadays, but 2008, that was still kind of like a off to the side, fringe type of idea. So this is from that time frame. When you meet him, let's talk about Louis DuPont, he's a very nice fellow until you step on or hit the right buttons. This guy goes off. Stretton remembered debate on a local radio station in which Louis was making very good points and then suddenly started talking about how Prince Philip was involved with the environmental movement, which was controlled by satanic worshippers. So in 2008, that sounded nuts. Now, everything which is just like common knowledge nowadays, you're like, yeah, of course, whatever, right? It was fascinating to me. Here was a man who was obviously articulate, but at times he would say things that didn't make rational sense. I think that we can look at this from a different perspective now and be like, yeah, this guy obviously knew exactly what he was talking about. He was very articulate. He was very well thought out and very knowledgeable. But when he said things which did not fit this author's understanding of reality, he just was thought as crazy. Nowadays, it doesn't really sound that outrageous, and particularly in light of everything which we're looking at right now, you're like, okay, there's something to this. Couple more things just to pull out about the DuPonts. This here is from 2014. DuPont heir dodged prison for raping his 3-year-old daughter after the judge ruled he wouldn't fare well behind bars. Scandalous DuPont heiress dies at 87, 18 years after her gardener-turned-husband paid for the Las Vegas murder of her son's drug-addled prostitute girlfriend. Probably a lot of you have seen the movie Foxcatcher about the DuPont who was all involved with the Olympic wrestling team and how he murdered one of the guys. And these are still going to be whitewashed stories. This is just the stuff that gets out into the press. The DuPont company and the DuPont family, they are experts in managing their stories. Sometimes the stuff gets out. So just imagine if this is what gets out, there's probably a whole lot more just like this which doesn't get out. But all right, so where do we go? You can't mention Satanism in Delaware without mentioning Arden. So chances are you're probably familiar with the work of J. Parker. If not, go check him out. He's been around in the conspiracy podcast realm for some time, and he talks a lot about satanic ritual abuse. And J. Parker, according to his story, he grew up in Arden, Delaware, which is a small arts colony, and under this guise of being a small arts colony, it is actually a force of dark occultic practices with satanic ritual abuse that goes on generation to generation. He says it goes back to ancient Babylon. You go through and you listen to, I think he still puts out stuff he'll go through and he talks all about the DuPonts, and he talks about Arden, Delaware, and he talks about the satanic ritual abuse, all of that sort of stuff. And so this is Arden, Delaware, right here. And then this is this area, this 2-mile stretch from right here to here is the here's AstraZeneca. It's right there at Fairfax. There's a Newmar Estate. Right here is Joe Biden's church. This is that 2-mile stretch. And here we could see right in the heart of it, 5 miles away is Arden. Like, this is all in the same sort of place. So we've got Arden, we've got the DuPonts, we've got AstraZeneca, we got Nazis, we got all of this sort of stuff. So now let us return to the Newmar Estate, because that is where this strange attractor field is located. So this here is a satellite image. Right here, this is AstraZeneca. Right here is the Children's Hospital. Right here is the experimental station. And right here, right in the middle, is this estate. This estate predates them all, right here. Let's look a little bit closer. We can see it. This right here is the mansion. This is the French gardens, which they're talking about. So the first thing I want to point out about this, which may be an indicator of an indication of the quality of the energy associated with this family, and particularly with this piece of property. I didn't go into it, but within the line of thought of like the DuPonts being a 13th one of the 13 Illuminati bloodlines. Like, I don't know if that's real. I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying this is just information which is out there. But within that being the narrative, the DuPont family is known as being like the witchcraft, the most ceremonially magical of the bloodlines. Like, they have the most amount of occult blood within them. And so I've been to other DuPont mansion. This is open for the public. You can go to this place right now. You pay like some money and you could tour the gardens, and a lot of the DuPont at one time estates are now open to the public for a fee. Longwood Gardens, if you're familiar, if you're in the Philadelphia or Wilmington area, you're probably familiar with Wilmington, with Longwood Gardens, which was another DuPont estate, and maybe like 30 miles from here. And I've been there before, and walking through it, my first sense was like, this is definitely like currently used for ritualistic purposes, and I'm going to suggest the same thing, or at least that's a theory. I'm going to go and float that by. That's a theory that this is still going to be, this is part of this occultic family bloodline, and this was the location in which rituals were held. This is a ritual site, and what we have right here is like, this is the container in which the ritual takes place, the physical container where it happens, and then the greater, so that would be right here, and then the greater boundary is surrounded by this wall. Why does a DuPont mansion have a stone wall topped with jagged glass? This right here. The A.I. DuPont supposedly said he built this wall with shards of glass to keep out intruders, mainly by the name DuPont. So surrounding this property, I don't think it surrounds the whole thing. Like, I think it's like probably like from here to here. There is this like expertly made masonry stone wall, and on the very top of the wall, embedded within it, is stone glass or shards of glass. It acts like barbed wire, if you will, except it's like, it's aesthetically pleasing. And there's all sorts of stories as to why there's glass. In this particular article, it's talking about DuPont was doing it as a show of defiance against his other parts of his family, because they were always feuding. Within Delaware, there are rumors that it was actually done to keep people stuck or trapped within the estate, because they're trying to escape from children who were part of the DuPont inbreeding, and they were held captive. That's one of the stories at this mansion, and that's what the shards of glass are. But nonetheless, no one knows, and they even say that right here. It's all lore, and none of it can be verified. The one thing we can say for certain is, like, you've got this wall, and it's got this kind of eerie, creepy glass on the top of it. And the point I want to make right now is, if this is this container, this is the inner sanction, and it's surrounded by this other wall, which, like, layers and layers of creating like a magical or sacred sort of environment. This is no different from what they talk about in the Bible when they talk about, like, the tabernacle. The tabernacle is where the Ark of the Covenant was held, and there was an inner chamber, and then there was an outer chamber. The outer chamber was like this outer perimeter, and then within that they had another, like, perimeter container, and that was like the Holy of Holies. That's what it was known as, and that was where the Ark of the Covenant was. And this seemingly, it fits that sort of model. So let's go look at this a little bit more focused. This here is a map of this right here. As I said, you can go and tour it, and this is our container. So this is one end, this is the other end. This is where we have the house, the mansion which we saw earlier, and then we have this on the far end, and this is the temple of love. You can see it right here. This is the temple of love, and here we see it some more. And so we have this classical styling artifice, and then inside it is a statue of Diana the Huntress. And so we can, putting it in context of like a magical ritual. This entire area and anything which happened within it is going to be a ritual which is applied to, a deity, to, whatever, like, whatever the mentality of what or whom they're trying to invoke or pay homage to. It would be this Diana the Huntress. That's what it's all about. Why do we say that? Because this is at the top of it. This is the bottom. This is like, this is the peak. This is the peak of this ritual site. So let's go look at Diana the Huntress. Who is she? How do we understand her mythologically? So Diana the Huntress is the Roman name of the Greek goddess Artemis, or said another way, Artemis and Diana are referring to, whether that you want to think about that as an actual entity, whether or not you want to think about that as an archetype, whatever that may be, it's the same thing. So Artemis and Diana are, they're one in the same. We could see right here, Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. Artemis is the Greek goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, wild animals, moon, and chastity, and the goddess Diana is her Roman equivalent. Here we have Diana the Huntress. We're talking about it's the same person. And so when dealing with any of these Roman or mythological gods or goddesses or archetypes, if we want to look at them that way, is they're very, very like deep and complex. It's not so simple as just saying like they're this or there's that. There's lots and lots and lots of ways in which these archetypes can be expressed. Generally, in general terminology, you have like the shadow side version of the archetype, and then you have like the more positive aspects. And I'm going to suggest, this is not a far stretch, but I'm going to suggest that by looking at everything which we can see within the DuPont family and within the DuPont corporation and everything with that they're kind of involved with the shadow side stuff, right? So when we see that there is an entire garden and seemingly like ritual site focused upon the temple of love, or the goddess Diana, the huntress, that we're going to talk about some of like the shadow elements, because this is undoubtedly a shadow family, a shadow corporation. So let's look a little bit at Artemis. Artemis, the goddess of the forest and the hills, she was worshipped throughout ancient Greece. Her best known cults were on the island of Delos, Attica, and in Sparta. Sparta is what I'm talking about right now. The ancient Spartans used to sacrifice to her as one of the patron goddesses before starting on a new military campaign. So we're beginning to see like Artemis definitely has correspondence with military, with killing of human beings. Like, you know, we can look at it from different ways, but like, let's go back to I.G. Farben, let's go back to ICI, let's go back to Alfred Nobel. You know, let's go back to the founding of DuPont. We're dealing with military operations. Now let's go look at this as well. This is talk about something else with Sparta, but the upper class of Sparta regularly practiced the stalking and killing of members of their servile population, the lower class. It was very, very common to hunt and kill. You know, this is the goddess of the hunt, to hunt and kill the servile population. Let's keep on going with this. Let's go look at more Artemis stuff. Artemis, the chaste huntress. You really don't want to mess with this Greek goddess. In comparison to the devil-may-care style of the Arcadian Artemis, there was the bloodlust of the Taurian Artemis. So again, we're seeing different expressions here defined as like an Arcadian Artemis and here a Taurian Artemis. And so as I said before, like I think it's fair to assume that the DuPonts are probably a little bit more intrigued by the shadow side. And here we know that Artemis deals with bloodlust. Over time, sacrifices of boars, dogs, stags, even humans, and the orgiastic rituals became major features of the cult of this interpretation of Artemis. What the hell do you think was going on here? Right? You know, look at the family. Look at what's going on. Look at their control. Look at then everything which else is happening on this 2-mile stretch. So Artemis, she was seen as a mystical being who could turn men insane and craved blood. You know, we would call that secondary psychopath. The Artemis worship in Athens, Sparta. There were altered versions of earlier goddesses with a more violent streak, but we can see that Artemis, the huntress, has she's got two sides, and she's got a very, very, very strong and blood lust-oriented shadow side. Now I want to return to this idea of human hunting. You know, we know that human hunting was done with the upper class of Sparta, and they would do it to the lower classes. And we can see that the Spartans were particularly strong followers of Artemis. So go back here, human hunting, a 2016 report by Daniel Wright, senior lecturer in tourism of University of Central Lancashire, predicts, so he predicted this in 2006. Thank you for this prediction, Daniel, right? Predicts the hunting of the poor will become the hobby of the super rich in a future plagued by economic and ecological disasters and overpopulation. All right, so this idea of the elite hunting people is not a new idea. As I said, we saw that within the Spartan class, but in the more contemporary world, particularly within contemporary culture, this idea of the elite hunting human beings was reintroduced into the collective mind through this highly influential short story by Richard Connell called The Most Dangerous Game. And in it, we see there's this big game hunter who becomes bored hunting big game, and then he wants to start hunting people. That's what the Most Dangerous Game is about. And this here is from, you know, the Wikipedia entry from The Most Dangerous Game. And these are films and TV shows that have been influenced by that short story. And you can see how long that list is. And the list goes on, and like these are like even secondary influences by this most the most dangerous game. So this idea of the elite hunting humans is been proliferated in the subconscious through fiction, works of fiction of all of the masses. But we can see right here that it has been enacted in this ritualistic center of the DuPonts for at least 100. This was built in 1910, so at least 110 years. So where was I with this? So we've got that, but probably the best known symbol, modern symbol of Artemis is that of Katniss. Katniss from the movie or the books, The Hunger Games. And, this is something which, people who are students of mythology, they said this out or they pointed this out as soon as like the Hunger Games came out, because the Hunger Games is about Artemis. Here's like, just a random snapshot or a screenshot of like, what if you search Katniss and Artemis? There's lots and lots of articles. Artemis is always shown with a bow and arrow. Here we have Katniss, who is always shown of arrows, Katniss, who is particularly skilled with the bow and arrow. Now, I'm going to suggest that the way Katniss is presented within the Hunger Games is probably a more of the positive elements of Artemis, and not necessarily her shadow side. But she undoubtedly has a shadow side. And this is how I would even suggest thinking about it, because Artemis is also the goddess of the maiden. So, like, let's say, like the teenage girl. The teenage girl, and think of like the archetype. Think of that archetype of the mean girl, that middle school age girl who's just like, nasty, like, just has no sort of compassion towards whomever she places in the crosshairs of her vindictiveness. That is an Artemis quality, but Artemis is immensely skilled. So imagine that archetype with not only just like having that meanness, but then also the skills of like being an immensely effective huntress to back it up. But we see this tied with the Hunger Games. And so, the Hunger Games this has been talked about many times, like when it first came out, and everything about the Hunger Games is suspect. The fact that it was written it came out as a book series and was written for Scholastic. Scholastic was the publisher. So it was like, it had like the National Educational Association. There's a correspondence between Scholastic Publishing and the NEA. This was meant to be put into the minds of children at this time. But nonetheless, like, in Hunger Games, the movies was immensely popular and well done, and, people loved it. But, it's painting this idea of what the Hunger Games will look like, or what that is in the collective consciousness. And so now we're going to go right here, and we'll go back to Joe Biden, because remember, all of this is connected in this 2-mile stretch, And so at Biden's inauguration, much was written about the fact that Lady Gaga, who sang the national anthem, was wearing this like over the top symbol right here on her shoulder, which seemed to look just like the mockingbird which Katniss wore in the Hunger Games. So now we've got like this Hunger Games symbology. We've got Joe Biden right here, right? As this is going on, and like, Lady Gaga, this is another one of these characters from the Hunger Games. So we can see how all of this is connected. So, all right, where am I? I'm an hour and 12 minutes. We're almost done. We're starting to wrap up. So we're going to bring this back to Joe Biden. Right? Joe Biden, the tool of the DuPonts, the embodiment of the huntress. So, we must end with the direct statement that the DuPonts today rule Delaware with an iron hand. I've talked a lot about Joe Biden, and I've talked about him mostly as it relates to Scranton. And maybe one day I'll do like a presentation talking about how they link Scranton and Delaware. But nonetheless, Joe Biden is best known, though, with his connection to Delaware. He's connected to both of them. And he had been a senator, a representative of Delaware in Washington, D.C. for nearly for 40 years. Actually, this 2009 ends once he then became vice president. So he's got another 8 years on top of that. And then what's going on right now. So if you are a representative of Delaware for 40 years, and if we know that the DuPonts they rule Delaware with an iron hand, that's just the way the world works. We know that's the way the world works. This isn't a surprise. I'm not saying anything which is surprising. I'm going to point this out right here. This is from Jay Parker's Facebook feed, and this is October 18th, 2020. And this is a picture of the rental house in Arden, Delaware, which Joe Biden lived when he went to high school. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if any of that's true. I'm just passing on information. You come to your own conclusions about what you think is factual and what's not. I'm just presenting information. What I will say, what is factual, is this is part of the mental story which is out there right now. This is definitely part of the story. So we've got Joe Biden in Arden. We've got all this sort of stuff. And we always hear of the, it gets a lot of traction, the whole Clinton body bag, the Clinton death trail. We could see here Biden with his, it's how the world works, right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Everyone, they're all friends. They're all friends behind the scenes. But you don't hear much though about Biden and his deaths. Normally what you hear about is just the creepy touching. This isn't even nearly as creepy because she's at least a full-grown woman, right? But he's got his deaths. You're probably familiar with this. So this is, and this is probably going to start to get a little bit more awareness in the collective in the next couple months because, well, let me walk you through this. So you got Joe Biden right here, and there's his wife, Jill Biden. What's going to come out, or what has been coming out really in July, is Jill Biden's first husband, Bill Stevenson, has been coming out saying oh yeah, Joe and Jill were having an affair for a long time, and that's what broke up. Bill and Jill's wedding was Joe was having an affair with Jill. And where it gets really kind of interesting is this guy, Bill Stevenson, which, his background is really, really interesting. But the one part I want to focus on right now is that he says that he had an affair with this woman, Kathy Durst. The Reds are dead, the Blues are alive. Kathy Durst was married to Robert Durst. Robert Durst is the billionaire serial killer. And so he said shortly after sleeping with her that she disappeared, and he says that he's the key to explaining this whole sort of Robert Durst connection. Robert Durst is a billionaire because of his family's real estate holdings within Manhattan. So they're Manhattan real estate tycoons, which, here's another Manhattan real estate tycoon. These guys are undoubtedly linked. There's no, particularly between the Durst family and the Trump family, there's no love lost there, at least on the outer surface. But, it's all connected. It's all connected. But that's not what I'm here to talk about right now. I'm going to talk about Joe Biden's first wife, Nelia Biden, and he's got a dead son, Biden, Bo Biden. He's got a dead, a 1-year-old who died. There was Nelia Biden died in a car crash, and Bo and Hunter were in the car at the same time, as was the baby, and the baby died, mom died, and these two had injuries. So let's go back right here. Remember the inauguration? Remember this inauguration right here where Lady Gaga's singing this whole sort of occultic ritual? Well, it began the day right here with Joe Biden going to St. Joseph's on the Brandywine, because this is where the burial plots of Bo, Nelia, and Naomi were buried. Nelia is the wife, and Naomi is the dead baby. So, what is her maiden name? Nelia's maiden name is Hunter. Now we're dealing with the huntress. Remember the huntress? Remember Artemis, the huntress? Now we got the hunter. You know, I didn't even go into the fact that Artemis has a twin. She's got a twin who's the hunter. But now we've got Hunter in play, Nelia Hunter, and she died in an automobile crash in 1972. Here we see that her 1-year-old daughter died, and her sons Bo and Hunter who died there as well. She is from Skaneateles, New York, which is the Finger Lakes region of New York. It's been brought to my attention by a few people how Hunter Biden has a Finger Lakes tattoo on his back. This is the link. The Finger Lakes region are so significant land-wise, energy-wise. That's another topic, but that's all. The book Gaia Matrix goes into that, and I've discussed that in the past. But I want to show you, we got a link here in name, and now we got a link here in land connection with this Nelia Biden. And the story which goes on with Bill Stevenson is that Joe was having an affair with Jill while he was still married to Nelia, and she was that played into her death. But you know, I'm not going to cover that right now. You know, who knows what about that is true. And this car crash where we have Nelia Biden, where she dies, and what's left is the father and the 2 sons, is very, very reminiscent of, you know, Princess Diana. And remember, Diana and Artemis are interchangeable names, which, you know, I just found synchronistically kind of interesting. And though after the car crash, Bo Biden, who was one of Joe Biden's sons, he died in 2015. He was the former Attorney General of Delaware, and he's often positioned as, like, you know, he was the good son. Like everything which Bo Biden did was excellent. You know, he was, whatever he did, he was fantastic at it. Whether that being, you know, enrolling in or signing up with the military after the events of 9/11, or becoming the Attorney General of Delaware. Like, you know, he's positioned that way. And as you all know, you know, the only surviving offspring of Joe and Nelia is Hunter. You know, the hunter survives. And whereas, you know, the good son, you know, I don't ever remember who's the good one, Cain or Abel, whichever one, you know, this is the good one, he's the dead one, and who flourishes, who's allowed to flourish right now. They're trying so friggin' hard to make the world love Hunter Biden, you know, is this amazing artist, and he came out with his memoir and all this. But they're also telling us, you know, his dark side. So we got Hunter Biden right here. They tell us that he was a hedge fund manager, a venture capitalist, private equity fund, and lobbyist, which, you know, outside of the worlds of hedge fund, private capital, and lobbyists, like, you know, everyone seems to recognize that those are the worst professions, the most slimy professions on the planet. And so we got this guy right here who has that. And we also know that shortly after his brother Bo dies, Hunter then begins dating. He leaves his wife and his children and begins dating, like, his dead brother's wife. You know, like, you can't write a script for a more despicable human being. You know, he's the all sorts of stories with strippers and crack and all that sort of stuff. Here's our Hunter Biden. This is our Hunter. This is our shadow side of the Hunter, and he is being projected on the world stage as, you know, he's just being projected on the world stage. I also want to point out this, which I find very synchronistically significant as well. And I covered this slightly in February of 2020. I was on I did a presentation on Higher Side Chats, where I talk. It's known for about being about the Kobe Bryant death, but I linked it into the helicopter death of John Hines, and the Heinz ketchup family, billionaire family. And what's interesting is Hunter and Christopher Heinz, the son of John Heinz, they were business partners. They started this thing called the Rosemont Seneca Partner Investment Fund, and this was tied into this whole sort of Ukrainian energy scandal. But what is so interesting to me is the fact that you got Hunter Biden, whose mother dies in a car crash, and then you got Christopher Heinz, whose father dies in a helicopter crash, and they're all part of like that same sort of circle. Christopher Heinz's stepfather was or became John Kerry. So this is such an interconnected, ritualistic death cult family. So I think I want to wrap up this last part on Hunter Biden by saying, like, these are the pictures which I think most people are most familiar with Hunter right now. This is the ones they give us. They have him, with the crack pipe and like, in the bathtub and just like, looking like a dirt bag. But that's not really the one which I think is the best telling of who we're looking at. I think that this one right here, this is our demon face. This is our demon face. This is the Hunter. This is the one which they're putting out there. I'm not saying Hunter Biden is a demon. I'm not saying he's not a demon, but I'm just saying this is part of the synchronistic storyline, which is throughout throughout our world right now, and it's all grounded. It is all grounded in this exact same place, this 2-mile stretch from St. Joseph's on the Brandywine, the experimental station, the estate, the hospital, the AstraZeneca. It's all the same sort of stuff. So I don't want to just leave it. I don't want to just leave it on this kind of like real kind of dark and demonic and disempowering sort of way, because, that doesn't do any of us good. It does us good to know what's going on in the world, but it doesn't serve us to just like focus on the darkness. So let's go one more. Let's go down here. And this is kind of fun. This is kind of fun here. So if the observer changes the outcome of the experiment, then is the exposure of the hidden bringing about a nexus event that changes the timeline. So it is unbelievably evident what timeline is trying to be sold to us right now, what is going on. But, at least from my perspective, from what I'm seeing, like, we're seeing some changes. So let me go. This story has been unfolding for me really in the last couple weeks. And I'll be quite honest with you. Like, it hasn't been comfortable. Like, this has been in my mind. I don't like thinking about all this sort of stuff and like doing research on all of these, like, sorcery sort of topics is, it's not good for you. But nonetheless, this came out at the same time as well. So, there's a TV show. This was brought to my attention by, Timothy Hartless. He showed this to me. He's been a supporter of Susquehanna Alchemy for a while. And he said that there's a TV show. I didn't realize this. There's a TV show out now. It's called Loki. I think it's on Netflix. And in it, it makes reference right here to Wrightsville, Pennsylvania, as a location for a Nexus event. So in the 4th episode, the Nexus event on your computer screen will display reference to Wrightsville, PA. This is a screenshot from that TV show Loki, and what this TV screen shows is all these places where Nexus events happen. So what is a Nexus event? The entire plot of this show Loki has to do with there being a timeline which is being managed to go a certain way, and anytime there's an event which will take things off of the timeline, they try to go and stop it, and those are known as Nexus events. And they're saying right here, and this just came out 3 weeks ago, that there was this Nexus event in Wrightsville, Pennsylvania. So where is Wrightsville, Pennsylvania? So if you're familiar with some of my other work, you're going to know that I talk a lot about High Point Scenic Vista, and you know what's on top of it. High Point Scenic Vista and its relationship to the 40th parallel in the Susquehanna River, and then this is where Wrightsville is. High Point has a Wrightsville address. So what is being shown to us in this synchromistic sort of way is that we are changing the, potentially, and I'm seeing this in a lot of these different sort of, these podcasts I'm doing with people, just like in a very, very real world sort of way. Like we're seeing actual, like, noticeable effects. And if there's anything to this mystery of coincidences in which we're experiencing life in this amazingly strange, weird way, is that all of this work which we're doing, learning about the hidden history of the Susquehanna River, learning about the hidden history of what's going on in Philadelphia and Wilmington, Delaware, and what's happening is we're changing the timeline. These Nexus events are happening. And so this is where all of my research began, right here on the let me blow this up a little bit, right here at High Point Scenic Vista. And where is that? Right here in Wrightsville, Pennsylvania, right on the Susquehanna River. So I'm going to suggest to you, my friends, as we think about what it is that we're looking at, just simply by looking at this, by becoming aware, are we changing the experiment? And so I'll give one last story before wrapping this up. So the most recent, I think it was released literally yesterday. Yesterday being the day before me recording this, there was a video which I recorded, a video released, the episode 10 with me and Ross Ben. And what we did was we went to Ephrata, Pennsylvania, and we had a tour, and we went to the Ephrata Cloister. But the first part of it was we got a private tour of this guy's farm, and this guy's family farm. This guy lives on a family farm which has been in his family for 10 generations, since the William Penn land grants. And what struck me, I don't really know this guy very well. He's been a supporter, particularly his brother has been a supporter of the Susquehanna alchemy sort of work from the very beginning. But that's basically it. And so it was really kind of him to say, hey, you might want to come out to my family farm. And we've got some really interesting historical stuff, and I think you and Roz will probably find it interesting. And so we went out there. And it was a beautiful farm, and it was a flower farm. They don't grow food. What they do is they grow flowers. And it's a huge farm. It's a really big farm. And I was talking to him, and I was like, who are your customers? Like, I was just curious. I'm like, who buys your flowers? Do like regular people come, or do you sell to like flower shops? Like, what was that? And he told me he answered me, and he said, we have a lot of different customers. We have a lot of different customers. In fact, we sell to grocery stores, we sell to private people. In fact, sometimes we just go to we go to private residences. In fact, I was just down at a DuPont estate. This is literally, he's telling me this story. It was 1 week ago Sunday is when we were at his farm, and yesterday is when the video was released, which me and Ross were talking about. But he said, we go to DuPont. I just was at this DuPont estate down in Delaware. I'm like, I've been already researching all of this stuff, which I was going to go and do on the presentation, which you just saw right here. And I'm like, what was the name of the estate? He's like, I don't remember, but it was in this like corporate setting. Like there's an estate and there's like all these corporate offices. Well, I asked him a couple more questions, and I was able to go and confirm, like, he brought the flowers to the Newmar estate. He brought the flowers to the Numara state. And this guy who brought it over is a young guy, he's 30 years old, and he is, from my opinion, and I mean this word in its best meaning, its best connotation. Like, he was just filled with like purity and innocence. He sees the best in everything. Like, the way he looked at his family, the way he looks at family, the way which he approached life was so like not affected, like almost the antithesis of Hunter Biden, if you will. That's what this young man was a symbol of me for. And you look at his family's farm, like, you know, they're not like doing like monocrops and GMO food. They're growing flowers. And think about like what a flower, you know, what it is, what it represents, what it does to the human being, like the joy and the beauty and the harmony. And like, yeah, like flowers have a lot of different sort of connotations, but coming from this guy, like, I'm going to take it in its purest and best level. And synchronistically, he is putting that energy in this location, this 2-mile stretch of this strange attractor field. And so I guess where I want to conclude with all of this is like, as we're looking at this, as we're going through with open eyes and seeing this story which is unfolding in front of humanity right now, there's another line which is happening too. There's another storyline which is gathering momentum, And it's not just here with me. I'm just good at telling the stories and presenting it. Like, this is happening to you. This is happening to anyone who can see what's happening, but can also see the greater connectivity within life and recognize that, like, timeline manipulation, like, it's eventually going to collapse in amongst itself. So that's kind of where I want to go and end this up, wrap this up, is that it is through the exposure and the awareness which we bring to the events of this time and seeing what's happening, that we are seemingly aligning to a force which has a different timeline for the people on Earth. So it's with that, my friends, I'm going to wrap up. This is Uncle Mike. Love to see your comments. I'm going to check out for a little bit in terms of doing like one-on-one sessions. I'm going to shut that down on my website. But if you're interested in any sort of support, buy some t-shirts, buy some stickers. I get about $10 from a t-shirt. I can always appreciate that. I'm still doing private tours. And then also, if you're interested in a copy of The Rights of the 40th Parallel, what I want you to do is just send me an email. Go to my website, susquehanalchemy.com, and send an email and we'll coordinate something. So till then, enjoy your day.